Morning, everyone. Morning. Just like to welcome you all to what was a sunny Kirkcudbright. Hope you all had an enjoyable drive up. It was good to be meeting in person once again, so first time in a long time. So can I just remind everyone that meetings are recorded and will be made available to the public and should be available within the next 24 hours. Members are asked that should they like to ask a question or be included in conversation, if they're in the meeting, to raise their hand and wait to be invited to speak. If we end up with someone online, and they could do likewise electronically. Can I ask all members who are joining the meeting remotely, when they join, to have cameras on and microphones off unless speaking, and allow members to confirm their full engagement and participation in the meeting. Members, if you're going to leave the meeting after it started, please state such if you're online by writing in comments. And obviously we'll note if you're leaving in the room in order again to make sure we record it. Just remind all members who will submit their apologies for any meeting of the IJB, including committees. Please ensure you advise the chair of the meeting and the business support team of the name of the member who will be substituting for you at the meeting to ensure they receive all the necessary paperwork ahead of the meeting. Can I please remind all report authors to assume that everyone has read the reports prior to meeting. You're not required to state what's already contained there, just to provide an outline and answer questions. Can we have a list of apologies, please?
Yes, so we've got Kim Dams, Vice Chair, as an apology. We've got David Rowlands, Pam Jimison, Paula Stevenson, Debbie Cochran, Tony Gardner, and Karen Martin, and Rihanna. Yeah.
Davis McCrory, yeah. Okay, and we've got apologies also from Bill Irving, who was substitute for Kim, haven't we? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
And thanks to Andy Ferguson for substituting for Paul Stevenson. Okay. Can I take this opportunity to welcome Alan from Third Sector DEG. This is Alan's first IJB meeting. He's come along as an observer today. For Alan's benefit, because we're going to see a lot of them, I think. Can we have a quick once round the room? I'll go first. I'm Andy McFarlane. I'm the chair of IJB. I'm an elected member for Ward 3, which includes Kirkcudbright, which is one of the reasons that we're here.
I'm Marie-Julie Wykes, Executive Assistant.
Hi, I'm Tracy Grierson. I'm David Rowlands, Chair.
Hi, Alan. Nice to meet you. Kirsty Bale, Health and Social Care Programme Manager and responsible for governance.
Hi, I'm Ken Johnson. I'm Medical Director for the NHS Board.
Hi, Alan, you know me. I'm Mark Kelly, Trust Director for the NHS Board. Equal board member on behalf of the council, and joint board. I'm from the Ireland side.
Hi, Alan. I'm Greg Black. I'm an NHS voting member and I chair the Strategic Planning, Delivery and Commissioning Committee.
Hi, I'm Gordon Gibbons. I'm an NHS voting member.
Andy Ferguson, a substitute member on the councillors.
Hiya, I'm Anne Farrell, branch convener for United Union, and for this badge I'm a staff side rep.
Doing Alexander Reject.
Hi, I'm Rod Edgar. I'm Communication and Engagement Manager for the Health and Social Care Partnership.
Lauren, I'm Steph Watch, Review Manager for Community Health and Social Care and Youth Executive today.
Morning, I'm Nicole Hamlet, and I'm the Deputy Chief Officer and Deputy Chief Officer.
Hi, you know me, Stephen Morgan. I'm head of social work and social work officer and also professional advisor to the IJB.
Hi, I'm Katie Kerr. I'm the Chief Finance Officer for the IJB, and I've also got a dual role with NHS Board Director of Finance. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Alan. You know me. I'm Julie White. I'm the Chief Officer for the IJB.
Thanks for that, folks. As is obvious, you've met some of us, Alan, but you won't remember the others, but you will get to know us and we'll hopefully, we'll make quite a good team and we'll go together. You've got a hard act to following on, but I'm sure you're up to it. Okay. Are there any declarations of interest from members? Okay. Okay, moving on to the agenda, if we can look to the minutes of the last education joint board, which was held on the 7th of December. Does anyone have any issues with the minutes? Can I have someone propose in second?
Not to move.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 4, action listed below in the agenda matrix. Amber, can you talk us through that, please?
I actually can't vote for that.
Oh, I do have a problem. See if I can. We go.
They are all up to date. I did follow them all up last week just before I sent out when we had our pre-meet. So if there's anything urgent, I can pick up.
See, I'll have a quick look. See if I can do it. Bear with us, folks. No, I'm not working. You got it. Second, sorry. Because we're encountering some technical difficulties today, can I ask that when you access it, as it was included within your papers, that if there are any issues or if anyone's identified any issues that they'd like an update on, if they can let us know, then we'll get Amber to provide that update. We did get through it previously and it was actually quite a bit of update, but it's quite a few more info as well.
Yeah, there was. I'm just trying to open it now actually.
Okay.
There was 2 under that was going to be discussed at the community planning partnership, which Valerie, I don't know if they've met yet. Are they meeting this week?
They met last week.
Yeah, we met last week, I can't be either. It's a workforce summit ones, listen to.
Yeah, Lynn Burgess was going to be doing a presentation last week. Did she do a presentation?
Yeah, she did. There was quite extensive conversation about the work that was coming out, that how that's going to be integrated into the kind of local employability partnership work going forward. So I think that has been taken forward to the community planning structure. And we've got Pam Jameson, who sits in the local employability partnership as well. So
that's when Pam said she would share that. If I can share the information on that, then we can close it off on this one.
Okay.
Then there was the directions. Which was under Julie, but I think you linked the sort of up now, haven't you?
yeah, I'll provide an update and manage them.
Then there was an update that I included following the alcohol and drug partnership workshops. We can close that off. That was held in February, so I believe it went well. And then there's going to be a discussion on the membership update for the IGB Finance Performance and Quality Committee for its own before, but
Will we bring that to?
that's going to come to the committee and then it'll come back to this update. That's all well on board on this on the plan just now.
Any questions on that? Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 5, which is the committee updates from chairs. Now Kim's given an apology and so has our substitute, so.
Katie, I'll take that.
Oh, thanks, Katie.
Yes, so this is an update from the IGB Audit Risk and Governance Committee. As I say, the paper's there. I'll assume you've read it. Fairly brief paper. We're meeting. We continue to meet on a quarterly basis, with the last meeting just on the 22nd of February. And we've included the minutes from the November meeting as an appendix to the paper, just because we put those in the public arena. I think I've set out in the paper just the kind of key areas that we had a conversation about. One was the external audit plan, which we received from the Audit Scotland as our external auditor. So that's now being signed off for this coming year. We also had a discussion about an Audit Scotland report that's in draft at the moment around the financial position of integration joint boards, which is due to be published in a few months' time. So we'll share that around once we receive that, and I'm sure it will set out the sort of the associated challenges with that. We had an update from internal audit and also the linkages across the chief internal auditor of Dumfries and Galloway Council. Really good conversation and a discussion about some recent internal audits that have kind of happened within the social work arena around that, so a really helpful conversation. Kirsty took us through a governance update, so we didn't have a paper, but there were a few issues that in terms of reviewing or a number of our kind of key documents that's in progress at the moment. They weren't quite ready to bring into that meeting, but we know that's in progress. And I gave an update on the progression of the annual accounts and the process for completion of that. So not expecting any material changes around that, and we've set the timeline for the sign off of the accounts in this coming year. So nothing particular to kind of capture on that. I think the only other thing just linked with that was we had to postpone the risk workshop that we had scheduled for after the audit risk governance committee. We were looking at getting officers from both local authority and NHS, and unfortunately we had somebody drop out at the last minute, and Kirsty is on the day to rescheduling that. So yeah, happy to take any questions.
Just
to follow up on that, Chair, it is worth noting that we'll have quite a significant update into the audit committee on all policies. So we have actually taken the opportunity to refresh all the IGB policies and linking with associated parties as well with that. So that's a significant piece of work that we've completed. In terms of the risk aspect, I really do need those subject experts around the table. We have got a good draft risk strategy together with our risk appetite in there. So I think it is really important that we get that representation from both constituent parties to be present to guide us in terms of how we manage risk when we are making decisions around the IGB tables together with the committees.
No, I think that's a very valid point. Sorry, thank you. I think that's a very valid point because, you know, we sit here, we offer our directions, we say this is what we want to happen without understanding what the potential unintended consequences of that might be, which only comes from the specialists and those with that in-depth knowledge. You know, we could be actually asking for something that would have a detrimental impact rather than achieving the goals that we're trying to set out to get. Did you stick your hand up, Valerie? No, sorry. Okay. Any other questions and comments on that? Okay, well, thank you very much. Next is an update from myself in relation to the Finance, Performance and Quality Committee. Can I at this point commend both Katie and Greg for completing the template. I started on the template and I just got bogged down. I spent about an hour and going round and round, and it really caused me some bother. I ended up phoning Kirsty and saying, look, what in it? It just seemed a bit unwieldy for me. So we agreed that I could just talk to my notes or the draft minutes. However, I think we're going to see if we can streamline that going forward. I would make it and yeah, absolutely. Okay, super. Yeah, we had an update from Katie in relation to the finances, and as everyone will be aware, we're not quite sure exactly where we're right on, but it's not looking good, and we appreciate that there are going to be difficulties going forward. We're looking at the delivery of Right Care, Right Place, which is actually quite an important piece, and we've got it coming up on the agenda a bit later. And that's really important in relation to not just the service delivery, but the financial impact that it's going to have on the IJB and the organisations involved. We looked at some of the directions, and at the minute we had about 33, and I'm sure Crystal gives an update on that as we go through it. But that could potentially be reduced quite significantly, which would allow us to focus on the key areas for us and look at delivery outcomes. We had an update on the mental health. I'll just scroll through on the mental health strategy direction, and we had an update on the transformation. There's an update going to the Transformation, Futures, Innovation and Futures Committee, and that went in February, so I think Ian will probably give an update on that. On the community treatment and care direction, it's a very specific direction which only looks at one part of the primary care transformation work, and David Rowland has asked for 2 reports to come to the next Transformation and Innovation TIF Committee, and that's ongoing. We then looked at the contract monitoring, care and support at home, and we've got a couple of issues there. We'll get 2 providers who are the talking about what Kirsty's just said there about a risk assessment. They're scoring high risk, but there were different providers and the reasons around it were staffing issues. So we're looking at going back to them and seeing what we can do to try and get a bit more information and try and understand, because I think there were very small numbers which made it look worse than it perhaps was. Also, Nicole made mention of the reviews that we're having for the care at home providers. And bottom line is we're wrote the outcome of the recent contract monitoring care support at home commission services and discussed the issue raised. Also, there was the conversation around right care, right place, the equality impact assessment. And we were quite happy with what's been done there, and that's been moved on to the council's social work. Did that come to social work people? Yeah. And it's been discussed there, and so no issues with that, and it's just progressing. And that's it for performance quality effects. So moving on to Greg.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. So, yeah, the notes have been provided from the meeting. So there was a lot of good discussion that took part in the committee, so I'll just draw your attention to some of the proposed decisions that were recommended to the IJB. So first off, we had a presentation from the strategic planning group. Now, our role as a committee, one of our key responsibilities is to ensure that there is a strategic planning group in operation, and that is effective. So we've been receiving presentations and input from that group throughout the year. Now, what we recognise, we were originally asking for an annual plan, but what we recognised was that due to this group evolving during the year in terms of reviewing its membership, ensuring its membership was as comprehensive as possible, and its processes were robust, that we agreed that it wasn't appropriate to provide a written annual report, that we would take the presentation and in absence of the annual written report, and we would expect an annual report to be given this year. So the committee discussed that with the strategic planning group, and we would accept that way forward, assuming that the IJB also accept that. We were given a presentation about a new national digital strategy and what the impacts and what the requirements are for us. And we were provided with a description of the proposed way forward. That proposed way forward is described in the meeting notes. So we are recommending that we approve the setting up of a short-line working group, and that the digital plan is delivered as described in the notes. Furthermore, we also discussed a number of forward planning needs that need to go ahead. So this included the annual delivery plan, where we're providing with a Q2 update, and we're asked to note that, which the committee accepted. We're also given a description of the proposed approach to the development of the 24-25 annual delivery plan, and that will follow the same pattern that we've had before. And again, we discussed that as a committee, and we are suggesting that we approve that way forward as an IJB, and that led into the longer term future approach to the 25 to 28 strategic commissioning plan, and the suggestion that we split that into a two-phased approach. We have an initial light touch review to identify what should be in that plan, moving forward to the second phase, which is a more detailed review. Again, that's in line with what we've done in the past. Again, the committee discussed that, and we're recommending to the IJB to approve that the way forward. So those were the main items on part of the business.
Thank you. Any questions for Greg?
Yeah, just to follow up on the strategic planning group, we have undertaken a refresh of the membership as per the Public Bodies Act, together with circulating a refresh of the terms of reference that will look to get recommendation from the committee up into the IJB, the next scheduled IJB chair.
And then the transformation, innovation and futures committee.
Okay.
Valerie?
It's okay. I suppose, Greg, it was just to highlight in terms of there's a new census coming out, and there needs to be that strategic joint needs assessment, and there's a proposal made to community planning partnership to see can we actually do this together and enjoy the music. There's a lot of data being collected about the local development plan, and lots of other pieces of work going on to try and do that, kind of wants to make that a really kind of good document. So I'm assuming that that will be kind of informing the process along with the census data that's coming out over the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had presentations from Ananda at previous council meetings on where the census is understood it was related. So we're going to, we recognise that is an important input to all this. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Any further questions? No, a bit premature moving on to the next meeting. Greg's asked us that the committee have asked us to make recommendations. Under strategic planning group, do we note the annual report was not provided and we're happy with the reason for that, and do we support the proposed approach to the annual report for 23-24 presented next year? Okay with that? Yeah. Digital delivery plan, note the partnership's commitment to develop a digital delivery plan, approve the formation of a short life working group to focus on development of that delivery plan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Agree the delivery plan should align with 6 priority areas in the digital healthcare strategy. Yeah. Agree that a project management approach provided by the project management office to develop and implement the digital delivery plan should be adopted with oversight by the Digital Transformation Programme Board. Okay. The 23-24 annual delivery plan quantity and progress report, just note that. Developing an annual delivery plan for 24-25, note the requirements of the Scottish Government. For strategic commissioning plan, endorse the 2-stage approach to the review of current strategic commissioning plan set out within the paper, and note the views and advice from strategic planning group. Everyone okay with that? Very passive audience today. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on now then to the transformation, innovations and futures.
Like yourself, Chairman, I'd like to summarize the best come from the notes. So we considered at the last meeting, Galloway Community Hospital review and update, dental services update, and general medical services update, and GP sustainability task force, and partnership and agreement activity quarter before we get that on a standard basis. But it's highlighted two for that in particular. So go back to the Galloway hospital update. Julie confirmed the new model can't come at any cost. We have a significant financial deficit at the moment, which will continue, and IGB has a responsibility within the strategic commissioning plan to deliver the functions that have been delegated to the Integration Joint Board. Our mission is clear and we must be honest and upfront. I think that was a very strong message from Julie, and that will align themselves to that. We noted to support the proposals to undertake a review of the Galloway Community Hospital, and we also approved that fully developed programme initiation document to be developed and considered at the next meeting of the TIF committee. But once the programme initiation document is agreed and gone through the committee as a proposal, it will then go come back to here for the Integration Joint Board for agreement. The only thing I really picked up on there, Chrissy Hill mentioned, I thought it was worth highlighting because of the sensitivities in that area, that she's got a fear out in race in terms of another review again, and that message must be clear. And we spoke about that and went into a degree of conversation, but we also spoke about consultation fatigue, but we decided again we did confirm that has to be the approach that we have. We can't really over consult on this type of developments. Dental services update was the next one. We received the presentation, discussed the pressures the dental services are under. No further resources being made available. The current situation reflects what seems to be the situation across the health social care sector. And the grim situation is what I've kind of highlighted for myself there. That was quite a bit of discussion in regards to that too, but that was a bit highlighted. The GP sustainability. For general medical services update, the GP sustainability task force. We've just established the GP sustainability task force group, the chair of the Julie, to the right that is. Currently focused on a number of actions. We're some being completed, and we'll be planning on moving forward for the medium to high risk actions. We've also arranged and established a communications with Rodeka group for general practice. We met for the first time. Work plans have been developed for that, and we'll come back to a future meeting. For an update, we noted the update and invite the primary care development team to provide the workshop on the work of the GP sustainability workforce task force. Sorry. And again, the other point which we're obviously forward to, we never see we get enough time to actually towards the communication engagement report. But I mean, so we went through that. It was a wee bit rushed, like I say, but it was a good report, well received. From that, I think it was pretty much the crux of it, and happy to take any questions if there is any.
Any questions for you? Sounds like quite an interesting meeting. That.
It's really, I mean, I just find that committee really interesting. As I've said this before, I didn't realise how interesting it's going to be. I think it will be the work of the integration joint board, but it is, I would say the hot topics, difficult subject matters, but ultimately, if we engage and deal with that, these matters in the right way, I think we'll come back to here and be a bit honest and upfront with the public and with ourselves. So there's got to be some real difficult decisions over the next few years, but really do enjoy that committee.
And I do think, and Katie's just going to come on to financial performance, and she'll tell us just exactly how difficult it is going to be financially, but I do think it's incumbent upon us all to make sure that we get the message out that whilst it's a tough job, and whilst it's going to be very difficult, we're going to work as hard as we can to deliver the best possible level of services we can, as widely as possible, but that with financial restrictions, it's clearly going to be an issue. Yeah,
yeah, no, I just wanted to kind of support that, Chair, just in terms of Ian's point about the importance of that committee. I mean, just in terms of even its title, the Transformation Innovation Committee, this has to be the focus for us moving forward as an IGB, is about how we genuinely transform our models of care to be able to respond to the challenges that we've got, both from a financial perspective and importantly a workforce perspective. And I think the key message was about how do we deliver services in a different way, in an innovative way, that is a sustainable model, regardless of whether that was dental services we talked about, the review that we're going to be undertaking or that's going to be proposed, and the IGB will make a decision on that in terms of support of the Galloway Community Hospital. But these are, as Ian said, really complex issues that we're facing around how we develop new, sustainable, transformed ways of delivering services. So I think the focus of that committee is going to be really essential over the next sort of number of months and years, just in order just to really think differently about what that shape of services looks like. And I think it's important to highlight as well, it is about how we make services sustainable within local communities. And that, I think, that would be a key focus. But as Ian said, the work that it looked at the last committee was very much focused whether it be around primary care, and it's looking at how we develop a model of service within primary care, within general practice in particular, but also dental services and then the links to the Galloway. So there's a huge amount of work going to be required for us to set out that, as I say, how services actually look and function moving forward in a way that might be very different to how they are delivered currently, but which continue to meet the needs of our local population within the resources that are available to us. So it's a real challenge, I think, but obviously look forward to seeing the output from that committee as we move forward in those really important issues.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments? No. No, I think it's right. We can't continue to do what we've been doing because we can't afford to. So we do need to look at new ways. And healthcare, like everything else, has evolved over the years. We don't do it the way we did 50 years and 20 years ago, and we have evolved, and we just have to continue to do that. I don't think it's constant, as we need to take a change. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 6, Katie is going to take us through financial performance update for Q3 and assess the financial performance of Critical Force compared to regional financial performance. Katie.
Yes, so where do I start with this? I think undoubtedly we know it's a challenging financial position. I think Ian used the word grim. I think that's a pretty good use of terminology, because I think we are in what I would describe as unprecedented times financially. So I'll take you through very briefly the paper that you've got in more detail in front of you, just sort of the key highlights from my perspective. I suppose the first thing is just talking about the 23-24 year. We're on the 5th of March, so we're into that kind of year-end planning phase around that, and there's not that much that we can now do to influence the year-end position where we're going to land in years. So based on our kind of Q3 update that we did just before Christmas, we were projecting an in-year gap of 20 million. So that's an overspend for the IJB. That's improved from where we were reporting previously, and that's primarily due to additional funding that we've received from Scottish Government. So the NHS Board has received that will pass across proportionately to the IJV. At the moment, we believe that that funding is non-recurring, but we know that there are obviously discussions ongoing at the moment around that. So I can't kind of factor that into the ongoing position. And we know that that's an improvement from where we started the year in terms of our opening plan of a deficit of about 25 million. I suppose just a couple of things also to add to that. We are reducing our use of IJV reserves in the year, particularly the social work reserves, so bringing that down by about £500,000, and that will give us a little bit more flexibility into the new year. And I've set out in detail in the paper the Q3 position for both the council and the NHS delegated budget, and I'm not proposing to go through that, but you've got a bit of that detail there. So I'm not envisaging that will materially change between now and the year end, given where we're at, but obviously be engaging with both council and NHS finance teams to sort of plan that year end process. In terms of our reserve position, I've still to do a more detailed reforecast, but I'm likely that we'll see substantial movement in that. Basically, our reserves are set up of very specific ring fence funding that we have, and we've been in discussion with Scottish Government around those. A few things like the Community Change Living Fund that we'll talk about that we thought Scottish Government was going to pull back, but we've now got that to use some of the priorities that we set aside for that, and that will come probably be discussed in the complex care paper that we've got later in the agenda. We do have a little bit of flexibility in terms of some of the social work reserves, but again, when we come on to kind of talk a little bit more detail about next year's position, we'll need that to support the position moving forward. So I'm pretty confident in terms of where we're going to land for the year-end position, and again, we will be in conversation with the NHS board for the deficit that sits around that, and looking at a share of that brokerage from the NHS board passing across to the IJV as part of the position. So when we get into the 24-25 planning piece, things start to get really interesting, and I'm in the process of putting together the full budget paper for the IJV for the special meeting that we've got scheduled for the 16th of April, where we will talk through this in a wee bit more detail. I suppose a couple of things. The local authority we know agreed a budget position last week, and we know that we'll get the full kind of consequentials as set out in the Scottish Government budget through that process. In terms of the NHS position, there are obviously discussions ongoing around how they will deal with the deficit in here, and you will have seen some of the comms and kind of press around that. So we're still kind of on that trajectory of working out what that looks like, and particularly working through into development of savings plans to try and kind of reduce the scale of the deficit as we move into next year. I think probably what's really important for the integration joint board to be clear about, some of that will be things that the NHS board can just take and deliver on, but some they will be seeking support from the IJV to move forward some of the transformation pieces associated with that. And I think probably one of the things that we need to bring back, Julie, is something that sets out what that looks like as we move forward. So as I said, saving plans are in development. Nicole and the service have been working very closely with my team, both across local authority and NHS, to develop those savings plans, and we'll bring forward more detail of that with the budget position that we bring to the next meeting. I think scale of the deficit is going to be between 20 and 30 million is the sort of numbers I look at. That depends on where we land around some of the savings plans, and I'm meeting with finance team this week to pull together the full set of numbers. I think, again, just a couple of things for me, just to be absolutely clear on, whilst there is full funding to support the shift to £12 an hour, and that's quite clear in the budget settlement, at the moment we haven't clarified funding for any other pay settlements, including both local authority and NHS, and also we've had discussions about the changes around the Agenda for Change contract, which you might have seen in the press this last week, which come with significant financial cost associated with that. And in reality, as I've set out the paper, the NHS uplift for this year was a 0% uplift. So that makes things even more challenging. So the NHS don't have any uplift to pass across to us as the IJB. So really just setting out a flavour of where we're going with the 24 position, setting out sort of the key kind of dates over the next wee while, and really just giving you a flavour of the level of savings. You know, probably at least 5% savings, possibly even more than that we're going to have to deliver in the coming year. And I think we talked about things like EQIAs and stuff like that in other conversations. I think we need to make sure that we are clear about both the risks of any kind of savings plan, but also the impact of those as we do forward. So happy to take any questions, sharing if there's anything else you want more detail on. I think I would also probably like a bit of a steer, because I know we've got a finance performance and quality committee in advance of the IJB on 16th about what you would like to see at that meeting for me, and if there is more detail that we can discuss in the board, I'm happy to provide that.
You always bring a smile. Any questions for Katie? Yeah.
Just up. Putting more on Kate, what you said there, celebrations. So it seemed like after that £20 million deficit at the moment, well, that would through brokerage, and we'll be starting there as zero balance, we'll have a clear balance at the end of this.
So there will be provision of brokerage to support the 23-24 position. That will still be there as a debt for the NHS board, but not to be repaid until the NHS board is in financial interest, a stable position. So unlikely to be repaid in the next kind of few years. So yeah, that's not within the projected position.
So there's something going forward that next year, if that £20 million, just I'm absolutely clear in my mind, there are 3 points that I think that £20 million is part of that on rolling on. But it's actually, we're looking at maybe an extra £10 million. Because you spoke about near 20 to 30 million, but I just want to see how much of that 20 million.
So I've specifically not gone through the detail of the numbers within that, but if I talk about the NHS position specifically, the gross NHS deficit is about 52 million, which includes elements that are not delegated to the IJB. The getting down to the sort of the 20 million for the IJB position is after a level of savings, but doesn't include the previous year's brokerage within that number. So it's what our underlying deficit position. Things like the fact that even our inflationary uplifts for 24-25 will cost us between about 18 or 19 million. And remember, I'm saying that against a backdrop of a 0% uplift. And again, the budget people, when I bring it forward, will have all of this detail set out within it. I just haven't captured that in the paper you've got in front of me.
No, thanks. I've got a much better understanding of it. I just think it's important then, once we see that, before the final, we need to have some kind of workshop as an integration joint board just to fully understand that and get, for me, a real understanding, obviously with Ella, the kind of decisions we have to make. Because we have to get hold of that early doors, I would say, rather than leave it till later on.
I did wonder if we want to use some of that session on the 9th as like a workshop, and I can do a presentation and take you through a bit more detail on that in advance of the IJB on the 16th, if that would work.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and Ian preempted mine. It just seems perverse that we're sat here just before we start into the year saying, well, we're predicting a 20 million deficit. And it goes back to the innovations and how do we work differently. And it really does link up the different things we've got as to how we as a group are responsible for seeing what we can do to try and manage that down. And whilst I think we probably take some comfort from the fact that that 20 million will be addressed, and then there will be brokerages somewhere down the line. We still have to be fixed on it now. We need to be working now to try and get towards that point, rather than just waiting and starting.
And I suppose what I've not talked about in detail is the massive amount of work that Julie, Nicole and others that have been doing with my team behind the scenes to kind of develop some of those savings plans. We've spent probably I don't know, the best part of the last kind of couple of months, kind of working that through and really talking that. So I think for you to see that and to get a fuller update on that as part of that process will be really helpful.
Yeah.
I think that will, I think from my perspective, we're further ahead with those discussions and those plans than we have ever been in previous years, especially from an NHS perspective. So I think and most of those you probably won't need to be involved in, or won't, you know, some of them are the basic drug switches, things like that. But some of them will definitely inform that kind of, particularly that longer term position. And I suppose nobody wants to be in the position that we're at the moment. And I'm not sitting here saying that we've got to sit and wait and be bailed out from a brokerage perspective. But I think you do have to fully understand the scale of the financial position that we're both in here.
Yeah. And sorry, I hope you didn't think I was saying we're doing nothing and waiting on brokerage, because that certainly isn't my intention. And defence and enjoy.
Okay, thanks, Chair. We go at 3.4 on the thing. Forgive me, thanks for reading. I've only had a couple of days to have got this, obviously takes a long time to get up to speed with it. But in the last sentence there, the NHS board remains on level 2 of the Scottish Government support and intervention framework. Is that what we used to call special measures? Right? And if it does, what are the arrangements we've got with Scottish Government in repaying or to reduce or get rid of the debt? Because, correct me if I'm wrong here, Katie, but it looks as though the only way we've reduced the debt is by money from Scottish Government and using reserves. And there's a small amount which has been savings. Yeah. So the question really is, what are where are we with the Scottish Government? What plan is in place? Right? How many years is that over? And what are they want you to get down to before we even talk about reinvesting anything in future services? Because that 3.4 for me is the crux of the whole matter here, because as an IGB, we're sitting here with our biggest budget input under extreme pressure from the Scottish Government, and it's on no meeting the targets that have been set. Maybe that's the wrong words to use, but you get the frame, you get the talking about it in that. So where are we, right, as an IGB? Because we can't sustain getting money for the Scottish Government and using reserves, because the reserves are going to run in 1-2 years max if we keep going at the level we are just now. So what's the plan for bringing this to make some real meaningful savings? Yes, and also if you can just tell us exactly what the Scottish Government and the special measures are intending, and what even more, what's stage 3? Because that for me is the crux.
So, oh, yeah. And I think in my paper I included more detail around so it's maybe a bit into the language coming in, I'm not saying that. So the framework is from 1, 2, 3, 4. So where it's still number 2, it's not special measures as you described it. It's a sort of a tailored support arrangement. It's the way that they are describing it. I think the fact that we're on level 2, not level 3, reflects the fact that they think we're doing a huge amount to kind of support and to identify savings. So I'm taking that as a relatively positive position. But I agree with you. We identified savings at the beginning of the year. We've partially delivered on those savings during 23-24. I think going at 6 million as compared to the target of 9 million. As we move into this coming year, the level of savings that we're talking about are sort of up to 18 million, even more than that if you add on the kind of the social work savings. So, Andy, I suppose a lot of that will be in the more detail that I bring forward as part of that. Because what has though improved in year is our position based on additional resource that we've had from Scottish Government, and I suppose I've needed to be year in year out to make sure that resource is allocated as soon as possible at the beginning of the year, and that helps us plan, and that helps us now arguably some of that won't be notified until later in the year. But I think the challenge is that and I think I've said this before, one of the things that's happened particularly over the last few years, as we've been drip fed on allocations. So I'm trying to financially plan without really knowing what those are going to get. So I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the ask, and I think that's what we'll cover within the workshop and where we're at around that. I suppose that just being honest at this stage, we do not have a plan to get back into financial balance. And I suppose if I'm looking at it from an NHS board perspective, neither does most NHS boards in Scotland at this point in time. So we are not unique in that endeavour.
Can I just go back and quickly, so it's a plain words, isn't it, because it's level 2 or whatever you want to call it, because I don't know when do they still use the term special measures, or is it, when does that kick in? And if it does, how draconian is that? Because I remember previous life here, we had some really very worrying things from other boards who were put into special measures, where they basically just walked in and said, stop that, stop that, stop that. Right, and you want to give them the choice. It happened. So we need to, if we're being brutally honest here, we need to know what that situation is so we can deal with it.
So, I mean, Katie will probably correct me if I'm wrong technically, but I think essentially when we move, if the was moved into level 4, that would be what would be classed as what would have been probably special measures, because then the control is taken away from the NHS board in terms, and a turnaround team, as they're called, would be brought into the NHS board to then make decisions around how it would address its financial deficit. And I think that's certainly from an NHS board point of view something that the NHS board would absolutely do everything to avoid getting to that place. And as Katie said, the work that's been undertaken so far, Andy, is about developing that plan for next year. So the Scottish Government have been really clear with the NHS board that it expects, as a minimum, the NHS board to achieve a 3% recurring savings target for next year. But given the scale of our existing deficit, we've also been set a further target to ensure that we reduce the level of our deficit. So the NHS board has agreed that we have set a target of a 5% recurring, or a 5% savings target for next year. And that's the work that Katie and myself, Nicole, and Katie's deputy Susan, with others have been working on. What I would suggest would be really helpful, I think, because that's for the NHS part of the delegated budget, but we all know there are significant additional financial pressures on the council delegated budget as well for next year. What I would suggest is that prior to the next meeting of the IGB, which is focusing on the budget, that we bring a presentation. NHS board members will have seen the presentation on the NHS delegated part of the budget, and I think that gave NHS board members assurance around the work that is being undertaken to identify those measures for savings. However, there is a real tie-in with the IGB that Katie had mentioned in her introduction to the paper, because a number of those savings will be, as Katie described, fairly straightforward. So there are things like we'll do medication switches. So if you can prescribe a drug for the same, to prescribe the same treatment, but it's in a more cost-effective way, then there'll be switches undertaken, etc. There'll be things like when we make decisions around what we call discretionary spend. So if there are things that we can avoid spending or we can reduce the spend on, and we'll do that. There's things like how we procure various bits of kit and making sure we're doing that as cost effectively as possible. So they're all fairly basic measures, but there will be other measures that the NHS board will need to consider that will be much more around that service redesign and that service transformation. And in order for us to do that, that's where we need to absolutely engage with the IGB around that Innovation Transformation Futures Committee to be starting to think about what are those big pieces of work that we need to look at that may actually take longer than 1 year to deliver, but they might take, they might be in that 1 to 3 year kind of time frame, but that we need to look at in the overall context of our financial position, but it will require significant transformation in the way in which we deliver services moving forward. Many of those will require a direction from the IGB to go back to the NHS board to undertake that work. And therefore, that's where we need to be bringing back in April, really clearly to the IGB, a clear understanding of what the scale of the deficit is for the NHS delegated budget? What's the scale of the deficit from the council's delegated budget? What are those savings plans that are the relatively straightforward ones that we can get on and deliver? And what are the ones that are going to require that further input from the IJB in terms of the development of those directions back to either the local authority or the NHS board in terms of those significant pieces of transformational change? So I think that discussion on the 16th of April is going to be absolutely, I think it's the 16th of April. It's going to be absolutely critical. But what I would be suggesting, Katie, and I think you were also alluding to it in your presentation there, is that we have a workshop or we have a session with IJB members in advance of that, that we're able to give you the full presentation in terms of what that full delegated budgetary position is looking like for next year. And that you've got a very clear understanding about those. What are the straightforward, relatively straightforward savings measures, but what are those ones that are going to require those much more strategic that the IJB will have to have oversight of in terms of that kind of transformation work. So undoubtedly, I would echo what Katie was saying, it's going to be the most challenging year that we've had as an IJB, given the delegated budgets from, because whilst the local authority have agreed to pass through the funding that's come via the local authority to the IJB, we know that still leaves us with a significant deficit on our council delegated budget as well. So we've got a deficit for both elements of the budget, which means as an IJB we've got to really think strategically about what changes we need to make in order to support that and move towards a more balanced position moving forward. So really challenging for us all, but I think the next month, and the reason we don't have all of that detail in this paper is obviously NHS board still negotiating in terms of what that financial position is looking like moving into next year and what those expectations from Scottish Government are, and local authorities just set its budget in the last week or so. So we need to work through those figures and then bring them back in April, Andy. I hope that's helpful.
Just one last thing. Can we include in that, because the bit that really worries me is both the council and the NHS are managing some of this deficit using vacancies. Right, that's a problem, right? And political, both capital and small p, means it doesn't matter how you try and say that. The politicians, and I'm not talking local politicians, I'm talking national politicians, will cry out that that's a reduction in doctors, a reduction in nurses, whatever it is. For an actual fact, we've not got them there, but the people are there, the posts are there. So we have that in the discussion, so we can actually just see the extent that that's contributing towards the savings we've achieved so far.
Yeah. I suppose one of the things we can do is we can set out our approach to vacancy review, which is a new process that we've kind of introduced within that. We've been quite explicit that where we have got vacancies, we will use those to support the position. And we have started to introduce more controls around some posts, but part of that is really trying to drive forward some of the redesign that we need to happen within the system. And because we don't have, we have to kind of manage that kind of turnover of staff and how that would come out of the system. And I suppose if you think that actually we're going to make savings of the scale that we're talking about here without impacting on our staff full-time numbers, then I think we do need to get real around that. So, you know, and I think even the NHS Board Chief Exec has been quoted of saying there's sort of numbers of staff that would need to be, I suppose, taken out of the system as part of that. And that's not something that we want to really, I suppose, openly kind of talk about so much at the moment, but I think it is really, I think we all need to acknowledge that will be one of the implications of this, Andy.
Yeah, I think all we're highlighting is how difficult it's going to be, and there are difficult conversations to be had, and we do need to make some difficult decisions. And as a board, I think we need to be brave and take those forward.
Yeah, I think we do have to be realistic in terms of there will be impact taking, you know, £2 million out of the system will have impact for staff out there to deliver. And what we have to make sure that we do is we make the best decisions that we can and minimise and mitigate the impact, particularly of those that are most vulnerable. So that process of how we make those decisions and use frameworks, I think is something that we need to make sure we've got really robust. And I know Kirsty and others are looking at developing that, because there will be impacts and we'll have to try and mitigate them, but there will be changes to things, and I think we have to be clear about that.
Yeah, and one of the key things is the communications that we put out, because we have people who see a headline, come to a conclusion, and then start to fight a fight that doesn't exist, and we then have to put energy and effort and resource into trying to address that. You have to make sure that the messaging we put out is clear to the public, to the staff, and to the people who use the service. We need to have a unified approach, and we need to make sure that we're all on message with it and we're consistent in how we do that. Willem?
Yeah, I was thinking that the use of our risk appetite work would be really important in helping that decision-making process and having clear sight of that. And if there's opportunity to try and review that, but be independent, maybe use that as part of that framework.
Ken?
Yeah, just Andy's point about, just specifically doctors, they said there's a reduction in doctors, but sadly, a lot of those vacancies will have very expensive locums in them. And it comes back to the whole discussion about transformation. We've got quite antiquated services that we need to transform to have fewer doctors, reliance on areas, maybe central belt in a different way, and more nursing specialists, all these things. But sometimes we the thought of having fewer doctors maybe isn't the wrong thing. It's part of that transformation, seeing a different future.
So on you, Ian.
Yeah, just a couple of comments, because it's Andrew that's really stimulated this debate about here, and what's going through my mind, see the run up to COVID, Andy was full-time permanent member, voting member on here, and we were talking about the exact same things, and we had to take a pause and we'll come back. And see now we get to that stage and we're picking ourselves up at that time to make these big decisions, because it's like we are now. And I said, well, is she coming back? It really feels like, well, what a bumpy ride it's got to be over the next couple of years. And it's no about sitting in the seat and I look through our eyes as integration joint board members. I'm not looking and thinking, oh, the NHS needs to get its business into order, or the council needs to get its business in order, because this is our decision at the end of the day, go back to the comments that we made. But see, you said part of that workshop was that, well, whether if we incorporate what the Auditor General has made comments recently about the NHS across the whole of Scotland. It's also going through my mind, it's not just the NHS increasing value, the whole of Scotland's been affected this way. I'd like to understand just exactly what you say, what does it mean to get into the committee about that, if that's possible. But that's my comment, and thoughts. Big decision, bumped it right ahead of me.
Coming from some of that, I mean, when Katie was talking about the vacancies and Andy's flagged it up, and then Ken said about perhaps transforming and reshaping. One of the key things I was thinking is, do we have a workforce assessment tool which says what we do need? Because at the minute we will have a set number of staff and vacancies and what have you, and we'll look at an establishment figure. And when was that reviewed? And do we need to do that again? Do we need to make sure that we're delivering what we are? Do we need to deliver what we're delivering? Do we need to do it how we're doing it? Do we need to do it where we're doing it? Do we need the same number of staff to do it? And I do think that, as an organisation, both the council and the NHS, something like 80% of our costs are in staff wages. So it's not about cutting back, but perhaps redeploying, reskilling, looking at skill mix and such like, and making sure that we're maximising the benefit of the staff, the good staff that we do have. And if we don't need to do something, then step away from it. Okay.
I guess in the sort of workforce assessment tools, again, just thinking purely in medical, I think there will be not fit for purpose for D&G in the future, because you'll have colleges and things saying you need to have X amount of consultants to run a particular service, and that's something we are struggling to do, getting locums, and it's that really different way of thinking about how those services can be delivered, might not fit some of those assessments, because I'm saying off the top of my head, but I think in medical in particular, that is not actually even.
I think it goes back to what Kirsty said earlier about our risk assessment and our appetite for risk. But I do think that we clearly need to make sure that our staff are comfortable working in that environment, that our patients are safe, which was the key thing. But it's about how do we make sure that we get that balance. Then accepting that where you have a large scale, perhaps those numbers would work, then you could perhaps move things a bit. But perhaps because of the environment and the rurality and the sort of nature of Dumfries and Galloway, we have to adapt that to suit our purposes. Mark?
Yeah, and it's also worth recognising that the healthcare staffing goes live in the 1st of April, which is likely, and it's also being utilised within the social workspace as well, which is likely to more informed and give us evidence more around in the establishment going forward. But I think, as Ian describes this company right going forward, I think what's really important, the IGP perspective is around what you've just touched on there, around the safety and quality of the services as about really being with us as the clinical advisors from health and professional advisors from other services to understand what the impact of the service changes, service development might probably look like from that patient safety, quality of care, or the service provider perspective.
No, I think it's spot on. I would remember we're talking about finance here, yeah. Finance paper. Okay, any other comments or questions? No, I think that was a good debate. Thank you. Thanks for getting involved. Go to recommendations. We're asked to take assurance in relation to the update of the financial position, whilst recognising that the current in-year gap is projected at over £20 million, which is an improvement. So we're making inwards a little bit an opening financial plan due to additional funding received from Scottish Government and a change in overall forecast position. Notification has also been received that there are further consequential funding being distributed to board before the end of the financial year, although it's not been included in the report at this time. There remains considerable risk in relation to financial position, and this could set that. Everyone happy with that? And just to reinforce that we do have a budget meeting on the 16th of April.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Thanks for that, Katie. Governance, moving across to Kirsty.
Thanks, Chair. I was conscious of some meaty items today, so I wanted to just provide a verbal update on directions. Right to right place, which is a direction with lots of subcategories to that, and together with complex care evaluation piece as well today. What I did want to know, members and chair, is that we did take significant amount of time at the last Finance Performance and Quality Committee to present every single direction that we have, of which there are 33. Now, what we did surmise is that we could probably be able to reduce that by 20, given the historical element to some of those directions, and we have been making significant work through this to make sure that we're following due process in terms of governance, and that those 20, by way of an example, will come forward to the next scheduled IGB with the evidence of the closure that's required. So that would actually leave us with 13. And that 13 for me is quite a good number in terms of that we can really start to focus on those directions and the associated detail to that. We have recently, over the last year, signed off about 10 of them following due process. We have signed off the new governance procedure in this arena, in our committee arenas, but also the NHS board have signed up to that procedure, and more recently, I'm looking across at Stephen, more recently the social work committee to give recommendation into full council that we follow that process. Now that process that I'm alluding to, that you'll hear me speak about all the time, is about that recording, updating and closing of directions and following a good process regarding that. So once we have that back from full council, that approval, that means we have NHS and full council approval of that procedure, which has taken quite a bit of time to get to this stage. But, you know, I certainly feel in terms of my governance role, I'm quite happy with that. So my suggestion, Chair, is that the next scheduled IGB, which is the 4th of June, that we take the opportunity to go through each direction with key measurables, key outcomes, and especially the ones that will require closure, but importantly, really start to focus on those detailed updates in terms of our direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. For me, I think there's a lack of understanding, a lack of clarity about which directions we actually have. So I think it'd be worthwhile for us to have a list and to have some sort of format of when this direction was given out, what instigated it, what was the intended outcome, and where are we along that line. And I think what that'll do is it'll help us identify any gaps that we've got in directions as well. I mean, it seems quite, like say, draconian to go from 33 to 13. So I need to make sure that when we're doing that, we're not throwing the baby out of the bathwater, that we're not going to be missing some of those links, that we have a cohesive approach going forward. Stephen?
Sorry to make the cut across your Chair.
No.
Just to say that at the social work committee just last week or the week before, there's a couple of members here today. They really welcomed the report that Kirsty and colleagues brought in our directions. The best time that committee was actually given in that format, and there was strong support moving forward in terms of the willingness to engage and look at that, and they particularly mentioned outcomes as well. I think that really does chime the conversation that we have just now about what's there, why is it there, when was it there, where's the evidence to close it off, not in a draconian sense, but evidence based. So full support from that committee as well. And, very, very welcome, and I'm looking forward to seeing the progress as we move forward.
No, I think I commented at the time that I do think that it's we had a bit of a letter C and we filled it in and made it a letter O, so we've got the circle now, where the local authority had a responsibility in relation to delivery of directions, but understanding where it came from or whatever. So I do think that that's a big step forward, and hopefully it will engage members of the local authority a bit more in the understanding of it. Andy?
Can I just ask, the bit of work you just asked or suggested we undertake, that we actually put in as well when if they've been updated or amended, because some of them might look as though they'll go right way back to the very start. And those people say, well, that needs to be reviewed. It's been in place since, right? But in actual fact, it's probably been amended 3 or 4 times as we've gone through the process. So I think it's as equally important to, if we're going to do that, that's
Different than
that we actually look at amendments, updates, whatever it might be. Because I mean, I know there are several changes that have been made to the originals.
Yeah.
So just to follow up on that, we have got a central database, so we actually have that absolute audit trail in detailed discussion when things are actually scheduled to go to, be it the constituent parties committee or into the IGB committee. So we do have that centralised database, and we're looking to make sure that that's actually available for board members. I think that's really important, because then it's informing you all of that, but it has taken quite significant work to get it to the place it is right now. That will link to our strategic commissioning intentions, our 9 health and wellbeing outcomes, etc., in terms of those key measurables that Stephen alluded to that we presented to social care, because we need to do that wider. It's not just the social care side of it that we've seen that performance, it's the health side of it as well, so we need to look at that as a whole. So we're working towards that as well.
Would there be a benefit in making that publicly available on the website? I don't know, I'm asking.
I don't see that. I think we would redact some information, so it's not fully detailed in terms of Kirsty Bell's updates when she's doing it. But absolutely, I think it should be in the public domain.
So as an example, we did a direction information share between the health group between the councils, computer systems, so to speak, IT systems, and the NHS. After a lot of discussion, I suppose that went on, and it's only stimulated again saying, mind, I didn't realise you could amend as well. If that's the case, or maybe one of the things that we could have amended is you've got a strict time frame on that to be implemented. So I wonder if that's the case, no, maybe it's something can be spoken about in the June meeting or whatever, but you stimulate that and you come with that. If we can amend them, and there might be others in a similar situation, we could reduce the time frame of that with the confidence We say that you've been implementing it, or it hadn't been implemented, you come back and they see why.
Why, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I don't know, I suppose there is one small question on that, is it can actually be amended as you go along?
They can be superseded,
Right, aye, so maybe that's one.
so it's, they can be superseded by something else.
Yeah.
That comes forward, be it through advice from a strategic planning group or through one of our assurance committees.
So even if, for instance, using that as an example, it comes back and says, well, it's been dealt with at very much at the level we want, we can supersede that and send it back.
And that's the key part to this, it's
Yeah.
about when we are issuing a direction, what is the time frame that we're actually going to set for that? Is that achievable by our constituent parties? That's the key part, and actually, if that direction is of scale, we need to actually look at that direction, the impact of putting that direction out and getting an implementation plan through the delivery board, but into the IGB to say, actually, and I'll use home teams as an example, is how are we actually going to deliver that?
I get it.
And are we content of that delivery model?
We think the direction might put forward and what the budget constraints we've got and say, you know, to make things absolutely implicit, we take that forward.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Bill. Anyone else? Okay, thanks, Dan. Kirsty, it sounds like you've just got yourself a whole load of work again.
Yes, thank you.
I'm surprised you don't take annual leave on that GB budget. I think when you attended social work, I sent you a whole load of work there as well, then. No, thank you very much. Okay.